In this dramatic story, we follow the journey of a betrayed husband who discovers his wife has been having an affair. After receiving a court order requiring him to share his assets with his cheating wife, he decides to seek not only revenge but also his own self-respect. By exposing the truth about her affair and the painful emotions he has suffered, the story offers a profound look at betrayal, self-respect and the power of forgiveness. Can he find a way to recover and move on, or will he be haunted by the past? Listen to this emotional story in raw audio, where pain and hope collide, for a profound and haunting experience. Wanda Nealon was granted use of the home until the children graduated from high school, while Mr. Nealon remained responsible for the loan payments and living expenses. She was also entitled to half of the value of her husband's business, and Mr. Nealon would maintain her car payments. Ms. Nealon was awarded 60% of all assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement funds. Additionally, Ms. Nealon had primary physical custody of the children, with standard visitation rights, including Mr. Nealon having the right to visit the children for 2 consecutive weeks in the summer and every odd weekend. Child support was set at $750 per month for each child, for a total of $1,500 per month. Given that Ms. Nealon had been absent from the workforce for the past 5 years, she was awarded an additional $2,000 per month to help support herself. The divorce will be finalized within 90 days unless Mr. Nealon withdraws the petition, ending. Justice Marie Matthews banged her gavel, preparing to rise. I blurted out a word that would change the course of the next few months of my life. Faced with her challenge, I replied that I wasn't sure what was confusing, and that I would even be willing to provide a definition if the word was too complicated for her. The judge froze, the look of surprise on her face unreadable to me. She slowly returned to her seat, but her expression changed from shock to absolute rage. When she resumed her seat, the cold look she gave me could have frozen water on the surface of the sun. To say she was angry was an understatement. She insisted that she wasn't stupid and knew what was coming, regardless of what I said. In the next few minutes, she planned and Toi noi rangit niet ba se ko mo quet din dung dian trong nhai ham do. Toi bay to su kim tianj doi voi ting hung nai. Luit su kua toi ti them ben tai toi mo koch cocking hiat, ko gang tim kiem thu gi do trong kap tai lu kua min ko the lam toi am lang. Ba Matthews li go bois va de doa ses em toi ko bao niu su koi tianj south 30 nyai trong tu. Toi dap li rang ko the thu voi 60 nyai va tu hoi lu ba ko muon thu them kong. Toi bay to neem tin rang noi ba tin thoang ko mo nyai danong ben kan, ko the ba se kong tro ton mo nyai ko chu nu ve. Toi jio te fi voi nong jua kai len. Dong toi mo fan chu kai bang te tre, goi y acute ba ko the koi len do de dat toi mo din kao nao do, ko la se lam ba de chu han. Toi kam tai nu ba dang kan tai doi han bat ky nyai fu nu nao trong lich su. I wonder if someone called 911 at that moment, thinking she might have a stroke or her head might explode. Surprisingly, the smoke coming from her ears was invisible. I didn't think anyone could blush that much after my words. She was clearly furious and sentenced me to 90 days. Her voice sounded like hell, while my friends looked at me in confusion. The court was shaken as I couldn't contain my laughter. This might explain the visits I had to make to the psychologists in prison. The next day, a letter from the Attorney General's office said they ko the ban dang tu hoi tat kan nun ju nai ko y acute ni agi. Ko la mo chut boy kan se gyup ban hu ro han. Ten toi la Michael Nealon, va hien tai toi 31 toi. Toi duok sinch ra trong mo jia din trung lu tot bung o min trung nuok mai, loen len voi nung jia tri truyen thong, noi ko mo kai nim ro rang ve dung va sai. Ban nen tun tron ji nung nai exuan ji dang nyan duok su tun tron ji va kong nen lu doi. Kai ban hua, judo ko y acute nia. Dal duk ma toi duok noi duong la lam vek chom kai, how phong voi nung gi min ko va song dung voi jia tri kua ban then. He doi shu voi nyai kok nu ban muon duok doi shu. Tui nyen, how het muon nyai kong bao jio ni den mat tre kua du do, doi shu voi nyai kok nu ho de doi shu voi ban. Ju dung dian trong kito giao la fi ki mat di. Nung that kong mei, toi chua bao jio joy trong yu do. I have always had a strong stubborn streak combined with a sense of justice, which has sometimes led to awkward situations. Once I have decided that someone has wronged me and set out on a plan of action to fix the problem, nothing can get me off track. One time, when I was in high school, I was dating Cheryl H. Haskins. We had been together for a few months, and after an argument over something, we broke up. However, this was only temporary and we would apologize to each other a few days later and get back together. This was not the first time we had gone through this, just a weekend to cool things off and get back together on Monday. Unfortunately, while walking past the cinema on Saturday night, I saw my cousin Harold taking Cheryl inside. Two things here: Harold and I are more than cousins, we've been best friends since childhood. We're the same age and have been inseparable for as long as I can remember. His family lives right down the street from me, and I was well aware that Harold had feelings for Cheryl. He knew that Cheryl and I had recently broken up, but he also understood that we might reconcile after the weekend. However, crossing that line? That was simply unacceptable. From that moment on, I decided Harold was no longer a part of my life. When Cheryl approached me at church the following Sunday, I turned my back on her. I couldn't bring myself to acknowledge her presence. Harold attempted to strike up a conversation with me afterward, but I stared him down in silence. As soon as he finished speaking, I walked away without a word. Later that day, during family dinner, I ignored him again. He tried to engage me in a game, but I quit and retreated to my room. My parents intervened, making multiple attempts to get me to talk to him, but I refused each time. Even a year later, after I had unwittingly taken his girlfriend, I still maintained my distance. Sure, I confronted him when he called me out about Cheryl, but that was the extent of our interactions. When I received a wedding invitation from him years later, I simply ignored it. When I married Wanda, every member of my extended family received an invitation, except for Harold. You could say I was holding a grudge, and maybe I was being stubborn. But for me, when someone wrongs you, forgiveness doesn't come easily, especially if the offense is intentional. Now, many of you might think I'm a fool for holding on to this anger. If that's the case, allow me to ruffle your feathers a bit more. I genuinely believe that if you commit a crime, you must face the consequences. If you make a foolish choice, you should be ready to deal with what follows. For example, if you decide to drive drunk and get caught, expect to lose your license, pay higher insurance, and possibly even face jail time. If your job depends on your driving skills, well, then you might lose that job too. I call that a foolish tax. And let's say a young woman chooses to have unprotected sex and finds herself pregnant at 18. Her foolish tax is stepping into the role of mommy for the next 18 years. Similarly, if a guy gets his prom date pregnant, he should take responsibility for the child he helped bring into this world. Choices have consequences, that's just part of personal responsibility. I wasn't willing to pay for someone else's mistakes. I worked hard throughout high school, focused on my studies, and earned some solid scholarships to attend college. I balanced my academic life with social pursuits, maintaining good grades while still being popular with the ladies. I stayed fit and healthy, and even though I found myself in a fair share of fights, usually due to my strong beliefs, I ended up winning more often than not. After graduating with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting, I pursued an MBA and landed a decent job at a large corporation, earning a good salary. As a single guy with minimal bills, I dabbled in the stock market, discovering that I had a knack for it and making a tidy profit. It was at a party a few months later that I met Wanda. We hit it off right away, and I asked her out on a date. To say she was beautiful would be an understatement. She turned heads wherever we went, and my friends often joked about trying to swoop in if we ever broke up. Even some of my female friends teased about trying to win her over if she became available. Eventually, I popped the question, and she said yes. I should mention that Wanda attended college as well. I like to tease that she was there for her Mrs. degree. Though she graduated with a degree in art history, which qualified her for her role as a barista at Starbucks, I sometimes jokingly refer to her time in school as a delay in adulthood. As newlyweds, we embraced a cozy life together. Just a week before our wedding, Wanda quit her job to focus on being a homemaker. Our intimate life was fulfilling, and we purchased a lovely 3-bedroom house. I was thriving at my job and doing well in the stock market. We weren't extravagant but lived comfortably, saving a significant amount each month. All of my bonuses went straight into our investments, and I maxed out my retirement contributions, aiming to retire before I hit 40. A few years into our marriage, I came home one Friday evening to find Wanda dressed to the nines, beaming with excitement. "Hurry up and shower, we're going out to celebrate," she said. My heart raced. Did she just say what I thought she did? We had been trying for a few months, so the news wasn't entirely unexpected, but it still felt surreal when she announced that she was finally pregnant. I swept her up in my arms, kissing her all over her face, excitement bubbling over. We spent that night celebrating our impending parenthood, knowing that our lives were about to change forever. In the following months, we prepared for the arrival of our little one, filled with joy and anticipation. But then came another surprise: twins. 2 beautiful little girls were on the way. I could hardly wait to spoil them and embrace my new role as a dad, imagining the joy of having 2 little daddy's girls wrapping me around their tiny fingers. Our families were there to greet us, their faces beaming with happiness. I couldn't help but notice my mom's gaze, fixed almost obsessively on the girls. I could see the immense joy in her eyes. Finally, she had the grandchildren she had longed for. Life had undeniably shifted for us. Recognizing how the demands of my corporate job kept me away from my family, I made a pivotal decision. I was fortunate to have saved a significant amount of money, so I resolved to start my own investment firm. I had been dabbling in the stock market, helping friends and family manage their finances, and it seemed like a natural progression. I obtained the necessary licenses and officially opened my doors, quickly attracting clients. Former colleagues began transferring their portfolios to me, and within a year, I had built a solid clientele eager to refer their friends. Yet, just as I thought I was on top of the world, life had other plans. We celebrated our daughter's 2nd birthday with a grand party, a delightful spectacle that, although the girls wouldn't remember it, they could cherish through the videos we captured. Surrounded by family from both sides, we were all enjoying the day, until something shattered that perfect moment. As I stepped out of the bedroom after using the bathroom, I overheard my mother talking with her sister in the hallway. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was bewildered about where our daughter's blue eyes had come from. My heart raced when my mother expressed a fear that if I found out they weren't biologically mine, it would devastate me. Unable to bear any more, I quietly retreated back into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I couldn't believe it. Surely, the girls had to be mine. After all, someone in our families must have blue eyes. My own eyes were a muddy brown, and Wanda's were more of a hazel shade. I mentally scanned through our family trees, realizing the only person with a different eye color was my cousin Mary, whose green eyes came from her non-blood related father. Panic and confusion washed over me, but I knew I had to pull myself together and rejoin the party. I plastered on a smile and walked back into the celebration, all the while wrestling with the storm brewing inside me. The festivities eventually quieted down, and as I tucked the girls into bed that night, I studied their faces closely. Some features resembled Wanda, but others felt alien, leaving me with a gnawing feeling that something was amiss. The following day, while Wanda napped with the girls, I ordered supplies to my office using the company credit card to keep the expenses discreet. I couldn't shake the suspicion that Wanda had cheated on me nearly 3 years ago. The possibility consumed my thoughts. If she had cheated then, was she still unfaithful? I needed undeniable proof. Days later, the supplies arrived, and I also hired a private investigation firm, giving them access to all of Wanda's devices. At the same time, I made some financial moves. If Wanda was innocent and the girls were truly mine, these measures would be unnecessary. But if my suspicions were correct, I needed to safeguard my assets from any potential fallout. 2 weeks later, I received a letter at the office. Locking my door behind me, I opened it and felt my heart plummet. I cried for an hour, confirming what I had feared: the girls were not mine. Deep down, I had sensed the truth but held on to hope like a lifeline. The following day, my investigator met with me, revealing all the proof he had gathered. Wanda was still involved with her blonde-haired, blue-eyed personal trainer, meeting him regularly and even bringing the girls to his apartment. Audio recordings confirmed their awareness of the truth, their real biological father. The next afternoon, I met with a divorce lawyer. Although he offered conventional advice, I prioritized the well-being of our children, insisting on preparing the documents but delaying the filing until I deemed it appropriate. Over the next 2 months, I meticulously prepared, ensuring everything was in place. On a weekend that took me by surprise, my cousin Howard and his wife Cheryl arrived, and the weight of my decision loomed larger than ever. As I faced this tumultuous new chapter, I knew that my journey toward healing and reclaiming my life had only just begun. A couple of weeks ago, Howard and Cheryl came to see me in my office. After some serious discussions, they acknowledged their past mistakes and sincerely apologized. It was a moment that called for forgiveness, and I made the decision to let bygones be bygones. God damn it, you people are so gullible, I thought as I recalled that meeting. Yes, it was true that Howard and Cheryl had visited me and offered their apologies. There was no deceit in that. I pride myself on being an honest man, and I truly forgave them, welcoming them back into my life. However, I might have conveniently left out a few irrelevant details, just coincidences, really. You see, Cheryl's family had a reputation for bending the rules, and some of its members didn't shy away from getting into barroom brawls. There were whispers, mostly from envious tongues, about a few of them possibly being enforcers for a less than reputable group of local businessmen. But who pays attention to gossip, right? Just days before Howard and Cheryl's visit, a shocking news report caught my eye. A personal trainer at a local gym had been brutally mugged shortly after his shift. He foolishly tried to fight off 5 attackers, who overpowered him and stole his wallet, car, and even assaulted him, leaving him with a broken jaw, shattered nose, broken ribs, and worse. He would be in the hospital for weeks. As the police continued their investigation, there were no leads since the muggers had covered their tracks well, wearing dark clothes and masks. Wanda, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was visibly shaken by the rising crime rate. Even after I offered to enhance our home security, she remained unsettled. By that Monday morning, I instructed my lawyer to finalize the paperwork for our divorce, aiming to serve her by Friday. My lawyer hesitated, urging me to reconsider, but I was resolute. By Tuesday, the forms were ready for my signature. Meeting my lawyer in his office, he warned me yet again against my course of action. After some thought, I decided to humor him. I agreed to give Wanda the house and even threw in our investments, but I made it abundantly clear that I wouldn't pay a dime beyond that. If she wanted to keep the house, she would be responsible for the mortgage and utilities. Not that it mattered, there hadn't been a cent in the investment accounts for over a month. I had no qualms about giving her 100% of zero. Unbeknownst to Wanda, I had been discreetly relocating my tools and equipment from the garage. I also moved belongings I wanted to keep into storage, splitting my items between Howard and Cheryl's ranch and a 1-bedroom apartment owned by an offshore LLC. Tracking down the owners of the LLC was surprisingly difficult, but it suited my plans just fine. Finally, Friday morning arrived. As usual, I headed to work, but a couple of days earlier, I had enlisted Howard's help to move my truck to the office. I left my car behind, hopped into the pickup, and drove to the bank. There, I drained all my accounts, leaving just $100 in checking and savings. Next, I emptied my safety deposit box. I wasn't taking any chances. I wanted to keep my plans under wraps, ensuring no one discovered a newly rented box at another bank that might link me to any wire transfers. You might wonder why I trusted Howard and Cheryl despite our rocky history. It was simple. The mortgage on their ranch was held by an offshore LLC with murky ownership, and despite our issues, Howard was still family. In our circle, family is paramount, and we protect our own fiercely. Returning home late that morning, I parked a couple of blocks away to check the GPS tracker I had installed on Wanda's car. As expected, she was at the mall, racing back home. I parked in the driveway and headed inside, where I had packed up the last of my clothes and belongings over the previous few days, tossing them into the garage. As I loaded up my truck, my cell phone rang. It was Wanda. Presumably her cards didn't work when she tried to check out. I chuckled, glancing at the GPS signal moving in my direction. I tossed my phone onto the table and walked out the door. Within minutes, I was several blocks away, breathing a sigh of relief. Arriving at my new apartment, I unloaded my belongings and got to work organizing. 3 beers in, everything was put away. As I reclined in my new chair, my new phone rang. Only a couple of people had this number, and Wanda was not one of them. I answered, and a voice informed me that she had been served. They assured me the video of the process would arrive shortly. I responded with a simple, "Okay, thank you," before hanging up. True to their word, 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification that changed everything. This was a new chapter for me, a chance to start over, unencumbered by the past. But deep down, I knew there were still shadows lurking, waiting for their moment to emerge. I received an email that would forever alter my life, a video that captured an unimaginable moment. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. The footage only showed her being served divorce papers before she crumpled to the floor, a sight that was both haunting and satisfying. The process server checked on her, ensuring she wasn't injured, and then the video cut off. I can only imagine the moment she finally read the divorce petition, realizing I had DNA evidence and video proof of her infidelity. From that point, everything moved at a glacial pace. My phone rang off the hook, primarily from my old office. She had been calling repeatedly, trying to reach me, not believing that I had resigned and hadn't been there for the past 2 weeks. In a desperate attempt, she even showed up at the office, demanding to see me. This backfired spectacularly. Security had to be called to escort her off the property. Howard, a mutual acquaintance, also got pulled into the drama. He began receiving pressure from her to reach me. Her sudden interest in him seemed too coincidental with my unexpected departure from the company. Restraining orders were filed, both against her and my former workplace, demanding she cease all attempts to contact me. 2 weeks later, my lawyer finally reached out to her. To my surprise, she hadn't yet hired a lawyer. It turned out she was running out of money fast, relying on the small amount she had left in her purse and the meager balance in our bank accounts. She started leaning on her parents for financial support, which only added to her frustration and desperation. As I took a step back, choosing not to start any new projects or leave anything she could potentially claim, she finally secured legal representation. Meetings were scheduled, but I made it clear to my lawyer that I would not be present at any of them. I instructed him to stand firm, no more money would be given. Tempers flared during these initial meetings, leading us straight into arbitration, which I begrudgingly attended. The proceedings turned contentious, with accusations flying back and forth. She demanded to know where all our money had gone, as if I had pocketed it. What money? We're broke. I shot back, feeling the weight of our financial ruin. I was now living in the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could find, barely affordable, and chosen mostly because I knew the landlord. Her entitlement was astounding. She wanted 70% of our liquid assets, assets that didn't exist. She demanded 50% of my business, which I had fought tooth and nail to build. The arbitration was a spectacular failure, and things only escalated as we moved closer to our court date. Then came the day in court. I faced the formidable Judge Marie Matthews, known for her harsh stance against men whose wives had cheated. I was acutely aware of the precarious position I was in. The judge's reputation preceded her. She was a feminist who had no sympathy for men in my situation. I braced myself for her disapproval and the inevitable criticism for thinking I could convince the court there was no money. The truth was, they had access to my financial records, but I was playing a long game. I needed time to shuffle my funds around, discreetly. I even went so far as to withdraw cash from one bank and spread it out among several others, all in different names. I had managed to secure a few fake IDs, one of which claimed I was Jesus Christ. It was all part of a gag gift shop my ex's family owned, but it served a purpose. Now, here I was, standing in front of Judge Matthews, 60 days into a 90-day county jail sentence. She glared at me, clearly unimpressed. "Have you learned your lesson yet?" she sneered. I couldn't help but respond, "About not marrying a cheating spouse? I grasped that long before your court, Your Honor." Her forehead twitched, veins visible, and I started to worry for her health. "Perhaps you should reconsider your attitude in this courtroom," she retorted, her voice sharp as a knife. I couldn't let her get to me, though. I expressed my concern for her health. After all, she seemed quite worked up. "Why haven't you made your first child support or maintenance payments?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. My lawyer wasn't there, likely frustrated at how this whole ordeal was unfolding. She implied that intelligence was a requirement for being a judge, and I sarcastically thanked her for correcting my assumptions. It was painfully clear she had no intention of going easy on me, and I braced myself for whatever was to come. "I'm sorry if this is over your head, but I assure you, I'm quite capable of keeping up," I replied, trying to keep the mood light even as I felt the tension rising. As she continued to lecture me, I realized how skewed our entire legal system felt. Here I was, imprisoned for a crime of the heart, facing a judge who seemingly relished in my discomfort. It dawned on me then, I was trapped, and the only way out would be to fight with every ounce of strength I had left. As I stood in the courtroom, I had to clarify my situation. "I don't have a lawyer," I confessed, my voice steady despite the gravity of my circumstances. "Honestly, I'm financially strapped." I challenged the existence of those so-called phantom accounts that were being tossed around, insisting that even if they did exist, I had no access to any information about them. "I need access to my financial records to sort this out," I pointed out, emphasizing the glaring absence of any records that could confirm the existence of these accounts. I urged anyone in the courtroom to show me the account details for these alleged funds. I further explained the state of my former company, which had been suffering from previous poor investments that forced me to sell it at a loss just to cover my expenses, leaving me with nothing. Faced with skepticism from the judge and the court, I shrugged, expressing my indifference to their disbelief. "Challenge me," I said, "prove that I've hidden any money." In a moment of frustration, I accused my ex-wife of taking money while entangled with her boyfriends. Her lawyer immediately objected, arguing that my accusation was unfounded. I shot back, "It's just as nonsensical as keeping me locked up without access to my funds, then demanding payments I simply can't make." The judge raised an eyebrow, seeming surprised at my audacity. "Are you aware that I can keep you here until you pay?" she questioned. I replied, looking at her as if she had sprouted a third eye. "It sounds reasonable to keep me in a place where I can't fulfill your demands while making impossible requests of me." Months passed, and the consequences of this legal battle began to unfold. The house went into foreclosure, forcing Wanda to lose her Lexus due to unpaid bills. Unable to afford an apartment for herself and their daughters, she moved in with her parents, juggling work at a diner for 30 hours each week. Desperation led her to plead with the judge for my release so that I could initiate payments. Meanwhile, my ex-wife's boyfriend, now out of the hospital and recovering through physical therapy, was frantically trying to resolve his own financial troubles. The silver lining was that his low credit rating prevented any new credit card accounts from being opened in his name. With only minimal insurance coverage on his vehicle and part-time work at the gym, he found himself drowning in medical bills, struggling to keep up with high deductibles. After securing legal representation, I negotiated a deal with the judge for my release from jail. The condition was that I had to find employment and start making payments, but I had to surrender my passport due to suspicions of hidden funds and concerns about being a flight risk. I landed a job at Taco Bell and moved in with Howard and Cheryl. I was aware that I was under surveillance, but most of my cash was already hidden from prying eyes. For the next 3 months, this routine continued. Wanda utilized a court order to garnish my meager wages from Taco Bell, which barely made a dent in her financial woes. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating my plans with Howard. While I was in jail, we discreetly emptied my apartment, dividing my belongings among family members who helped transport packages unnoticed. As time passed, I focused on work and staying out of sight. However, Taco Bell eventually obtained a restraining order against Wanda due to her constant disruptions at the restaurant. Although I had the option to terminate my employment, a discreet payment to the manager allowed me to keep my job while navigating the legal turmoil. My lawyer, initially representing the new owners of my former company, eventually became my legal advocate. She possessed a fierce determination reminiscent of a barracuda, and during our encounters by the pool, we dismissed the ethical implications of our lawyer-client relationship. In Russia, scruples are just a form of payment, I joked, while morals are merely large paintings hanging on walls. Now, you might be curious about my finances. Yes, I sold my firm, but no, I didn't sell it to myself. I was determined not to give Wanda any leverage to claim a part of the company. The sale took place overseas, and since the funds never entered the United States, they escaped the jurisdiction of U.S. laws. The only way Wanda could access those funds was if I brought any of it into a U.S. bank, which I had no intention of doing. The amount I received was substantial, alongside my investment accounts totaling around $10 million. In addition, cash from my safety deposit box, checking, and savings accounts amounted to approximately $200,000. I had some cash available for my plans, leaving me with about $150,000 still on hand. I wasn't planning to carry any of it with me, so when that lovely Saturday afternoon rolled around, everything was in place for another barbecue with my extended family. I was busy helping Howard with the grill and smoker when Julia, my lawyer, arrived. As the day unfolded, one of Cheryl's uncles approached me with a warm smile, expressing his gratitude for my support of Cheryl and Howard. "I'm glad we finally reconnected," he said. After a brief conversation, he handed me an envelope, and I couldn't help but wonder what new twists awaited me in this unfolding saga of my life. As the evening progressed, I entrusted a significant item to Julia for safekeeping. Later, I stood before our friends and family, bursting with excitement as I made a big announcement. The lion holder for the ranch had declared that Howard and Cheryl had officially paid off the mortgage, making them the proud owners of the ranch, free and clear. The room erupted in cheers and applause. It was a moment of pure joy and celebration. We danced, laughed, and shared stories late into the night, relishing the victory together. Eventually, the time came for our guests to start heading home. Julia, however, couldn't stay the night. She had an early flight to catch the next morning. With a flurry of goodbyes, she left with a convoy of 6 cars. Interestingly, she was set to fly out of an airport in a neighboring state, and she had already packed everything she needed for her trip, stowing her bags in the trunk of her rented car. In her haste, she bypassed her apartment, heading straight to the airport instead. As the night wore on, no one noticed a man stealthily climbing out of the backseat of her car in the parking garage. Nor did anyone pay attention to the man casually trailing behind her as they made their way to the international terminal. This man was Michael Nealon, whose circumstances had prevented him from traveling outside the U.S. He had surrendered his passport to the court, leaving him without the means to escape. On the other hand, Mitchell Nelson's passport went unnoticed, and as fate would have it, he and Julia held hands, seated together in first class as they set off for Mexico City. The plot thickened when Julia Davis seemed to vanish without a trace. Instead, Jimmy Nelson joined Mitchell for their connecting flight to Ecuador. Just 2 days later, in a twist of irony, Greg and Samantha Cooper found themselves basking in the sun on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica, officially becoming members of the Mile High Club. Waiting for them there was an old Chevy pickup that bore an uncanny resemblance to the one that had mysteriously disappeared from Howard and Cheryl's ranch. Fast forward 2 weeks after the barbecue, and a bench warrant was issued for Michael Nealon. He was let go from his job just 2 days after the festivities, missing work without notice and neglecting payments to his ex-wife. When Howard and Cheryl faced the court, their lawyer, clad in a sharp $5,000 suit, argued that the couple had no responsibility toward their cousin, who had rented a room and subsequently vanished. They even filed a suit against him for back rent. Their only defense: he had driven off in his old pickup one afternoon and never returned. No one believed their claims, yet there was no evidence to prove otherwise. Over the next few years, Greg Cooper ran a small charter fishing boat while Samantha managed their cantina. They thrived in their small village, residing in one of the larger haciendas that offered a few luxurious comforts. Their lives were simple yet fulfilling, marked by their deep love for one another. Many evenings, they welcomed guests to their cantina or their lavish hacienda, quickly becoming beloved members of the community. Whenever there was a need, they generously offered their support. In his spare time, Greg dabbled in the stock market when he wasn't out on his boat or tending to the cantina. He even set up accounts for some locals, helping them manage their finances and invest wisely. Now, as for Judge Marie Matthews, I couldn't help but chuckle a few years after our escape to Costa Rica. The judge, known for his stern demeanor, faced his own dose of karma. His wife, notorious for her man-hating ways, was caught in a scandalous affair with another man. Ironically, Judge Matthews had adopted her 3 children when they married. Following their split, he found himself paying child support, maintenance, and house payments for his ex-wife, who wasted no time moving her new boyfriend in. They lived as though they were a typical couple, despite not being officially married. Whispers circulated about their upcoming wedding date, which was allegedly set for precisely 1 week after their youngest son graduated from college, perfectly timed to coincide with the end of Judge Matthews's financial obligations.